Today I'm going to be reviewing the film Behind High Walls, which is a short film produced by students at the American University in Cairo under the supervision of Professor Tanya Kamaluddin. The short film is narrated by our protagonist, Karim, who we find out is actually dead. He recalls past events that took place in his life, such as him partaking in the 2011 revolution, being involved in drugs, and having a falling out with his lover. The main theme is the ambition of the Arab youth in such a critical time in Egyptian history. The film alternates between the protagonist's narration and then the funeral held for him and how his family members and friends are dealing with his death. The film starts out with a very unusual and mysterious situation, which is the dead protagonist talking to the audience and bluntly stating that he is dead.
As for myself, I'm dead.
This was a really efficient way to start the film because it grabs the attention of the audience and stimulates their curiosity. It raises the question of why this protagonist is dead and what does he have to tell us. The ambiguity is then sustained throughout the whole film as the audience never really finds out why the protagonist died. We hear theories from friends of him committing suicide after the revolution, and then other stories claiming he overdosed on drugs. The air of mystery in the film is a point of strength as it keeps the audience strongly invested in it. The camera is used in a very interesting way throughout the film. Twice, we see what is known as a tracking shot. This is where a camera is following a moving subject. Through this camera movement, we are able to walk through the funeral setting with the moving subject, getting an overall idea of the environment in a very engaging manner. This is a really seamless way for the audience to get to know the setting, and I think it worked well in this movie. In terms of shots, the movie is mainly composed of medium to close-up shots. What I realized the film was lacking is an establishing shot. It would have been nice if that were included at the very start, for example showing old Egyptian apartments and streets. This would have allowed the audience to get a better sense of the broader environment instead of immediately starting with a shot inside the apartment. Here is an example of a shot that could have been included. When the protagonist was narrating his story, a lot of close-up shots were used, and I think that was well selected. The close-up shots added to the intensity of his narration and also really brought the focus to his face and the emotional expressions he presented. For example, in this shot, we see through the close-up that the protagonist is lost in thought, contemplating the choices he has made. If this were presented through a full shot, we would not have easily got the same impression or gathered the same information. This really highlights how different camera shots are crucial in different situations. Another example is where a master shot is used to show the different relations between the characters in the scene. We can see that the three friends are sitting next to each other at the funeral, and then two other people are sitting further away on the couch engaging in their own conversation. Through the camera alone, without hearing the dialogue, we can tell that those three individuals are friends. Lastly, other than the shots, the angle of the camera was sometimes intentionally altered to portray different messages. In this example here, it shows a low-angle shot. This shot generally portrays power and dominance, and this very much suits the character in the frame, who gives off a very cocky attitude and even goes on to badmouth the dead protagonist at his own funeral. The authority this character thinks he has to do such a thing is translated through the low angle of the camera. Throughout the film, in specific parts, there was very eerie music playing in the background, which really planted this feeling of discomfort and unease within the audience. In a way, the music gives the audience a glimpse of the emotions running through the characters, which I think is very important and helps the audience to empathize with the characters. Also, in specific parts when the protagonist was talking, his voice would echo. This makes it seem as if the protagonist is a figment of our imagination, because after all, it is unrealistic for a dead person to relay their life story.
ارفع راسك فوق انت مصري.
Having this echo effect adds to the strangeness of the situation. It also makes the protagonist feel very far and detached from the world, which is indeed the case being presented. The film has some edits that grabbed my attention and I really liked. First off, there was a recurrent use of the dissolve or fade transition between the protagonist scenes and the funeral scenes. I think this was well chosen because after all, the protagonist is supposed to be dead, so the way the transition is a fade supports the idea of him departing life and kind of puts him in this dreamlike, unrealistic state. It matches the idea of humans being full of life and then fading into death. Furthermore, I realized they included match edits which were so seamless I did not notice at first glance. For example, there was a cut in action in this scene. The way one character walks out of the frame just for the other to walk into the frame in a different location definitely provides a very seamless edit that does not interrupt the audience's attention. After the protagonist finishes telling his story, the movie ends with water being poured over his head. This definitely causes the audience to ponder what that must have meant. And whilst there is no sure answer, it did portray a specific message to me. Since water represents purity, it felt as if that after his death and after relaying his story, the protagonist was being cleansed from the sins and troubles of the world he had been exposed to. It seemed like death was somewhat of a peaceful alternative away from all the political feuds and socioeconomic issues. Overall, I would say the film makes a very strong statement and does include a well-developed script as well as a range of shots and edits. However, if there is one thing that could have been improved, it would definitely be the acting, because despite the great technical qualities, the acting somehow decreased the impact of the film. But keeping in mind that this is a student-produced movie, I think the hard work is very evident and should be very much appreciated.